It was 10 o'clock at night, and the heat was suffocating. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on the jungle, with not a breath of wind. The coal-black sky occasionally opened up with dull flashes of lightning from one end of the horizon to the other, but the whistling storm from the south was still far off. Along a cattle path amidst the white esparto grass, Lanceolada advanced with the slow, deliberate movement typical of vipers. She was a beautiful yarara, 1.5 meters long pit viper, with the black, angular markings on her flank, sharply serrated, scale by scale. She moved forward, testing the safety of the ground with her tongue, which in snakes perfectly replaces fingers. She was hunting. Upon reaching a crossroads, she stopped, coiled herself up neatly, shifted around for a moment to settle in, and then, after lowering her head to the level of her coils, rested her lower jaw on them and waited, motionless. Minute after minute she waited for 5 hours. By the end of this time, she remained in this same stillness. It was a bad night. Dawn was breaking, and she was about to retreat when she changed her mind. Against the pale sky of the east, a huge shadow was outlined.
"I'd like to pass near the house,"
the yarara said to herself.
"I've been hearing noises for days, and I need to be on alert."
And she prudently moved toward the shadow. The house Lanceolada referred to was an old wooden bungalow, all whitewashed. Around it stood 2 or 3 sheds. The building had been uninhabited for as long as anyone could remember. Now, strange noises could be heard. Clanking iron, horses' neighs, a combination of sounds that unmistakably indicated the presence of man. A bad sign. But it was necessary to be sure, and Lanceolada did so much sooner than she would have liked. An unmistakable sound of a door opening reached her ears. The viper raised her head, and while noticing that a blonde light on the horizon heralded the dawn, she saw a tall, sturdy shadow advancing toward her. She also heard the sound of footsteps. The sure, firm, widely spaced tread that unmistakably indicated the enemy.
"The man,"
murmured Lanceolada, and, quick as lightning, she coiled up in defense. The shadow was upon her. A huge foot landed beside her, and the yarara, with all the violence of an attack where her life was at stake, launched her head against it, and then recoiled back to her previous position. The man stopped. He thought he had felt something strike his boots. He looked at the grass around him without moving his feet from where they were, and as he could make out nothing in the darkness, barely broken by the vague light of dawn, he continued on his way. But Lanceolada saw that the house was beginning to come alive, this time truly and effectively with the life of man. The yarara began her retreat to her lair, taking with her the certainty that that nocturnal act was nothing more than the prologue to the great drama that was about to unfold. The next day, Lanceolada's first concern was the danger that loomed over the entire family with the arrival of man. For the entire animal kingdom, man and devastation have been synonymous since time immemorial. For snakes in particular, disaster was embodied in 2 horrors, the machete probing, stirring the very belly of the jungle, and the fire that annihilates the forest immediately afterward, along with the hidden lairs within it. It became urgent, therefore, to prevent this. Lanceolada waited for the new night to set her plan in motion. Without much difficulty, she found 2 companions who sounded the alarm. For her part, she scouted the most likely places for a successful encounter until midnight, with such luck that by 2 in the morning, the Congress was assembled, not in full, but with a majority of species present to decide what action should be taken. At the base of a 5-meter-high stone wall, deep in the forest, There was a cavern concealed by ferns that almost blocked the entrance. This cave had served as a lair for a long time for Terrifica, a rattlesnake, old among the old, whose tail bore 32 rattles. Although her length did not exceed 1 meter and 40 centimeters, she was as thick as a bottle. A magnificent specimen, her body was marked with yellow diamonds. She was strong, tenacious, capable of remaining in the same spot for 7 hours, facing the enemy, ready to straighten her fangs with internal canals, which are, as is well known, if not the largest, the most admirably constructed of all venomous snakes. Thus it was there, under the imminent threat and presided over by the rattlesnake, that the Congress of Snakes gathered. Besides Lanceolada and Terrifica, there were present other Yararas of the land. The small Coatiarita, the youngest of the family, with the reddish line along her sides clearly visible and her head particularly sharp. Also present, negligently sprawled as if she cared for nothing but showing off the white and brown curves of her back along long salmon bands, was the slender Neuvid, a paragon of beauty, who had kept for herself the name of the naturalist who classified her species. There was Cruzada, called the cross viper in the south, powerful and bold, rivaling Neuvid in terms of beauty and pattern. There was Atros, with a name sufficiently ominous. And finally, Urutu Dorado, the Yararakusu, discreetly concealing in the depths of the cavern her 170 centimeters of black velvet crossed obliquely by golden bands. It should be noted that the species of the formidable genus Lachesis or Yararas, to which all the Congress members except Terrifica belonged, have long maintained a rivalry over the beauty of their patterns and colors. Few creatures, indeed, are as well endowed as they are. According to viper law, no species that is scarce or lacks true dominance in the land can lead the empire's assemblies. Because of this, Urutu Dorado, a magnificent but rare creature of death, did not seek this honor and willingly ceded it to the rattlesnake, which, though weaker, is remarkably abundant. With the majority present, Terrifica opened the session.
Comrades, we have been informed by Lanceolada of the ominous presence of man. I believe I speak for all of us in our desire to protect our empire from this enemy invasion. There is only one course of action, as experience tells us that abandoning the territory remedies nothing. That course, as you all know, is war against man, without truce or mercy, starting tonight, to which each species will contribute its strengths. In this circumstance, I am pleased to set aside my human distinction. I am no longer a rattlesnake. I am a Yarara, like all of you. Yararas, who bear death as their black banner. We are death, comrades. And now, let one of you propose a plan of action.
It is well known, at least within the Viper Empire, that what Terrifica has in the length of her fangs, she lacks in intelligence. She knows this too, and although incapable of devising any plan, she has, as an old queen, enough tact to remain silent. Then Cruzada, stretching lazily, said,
I agree with Terrifica, and I believe that until we have a plan, we can do nothing, and should do nothing. What I regret is the absence of our non-venomous cousins, the snakes.
A long silence followed. Evidently, the suggestion did not sit well with the vipers. Cruzada smiled vaguely and continued.
I regret what is happening, but I would just like to remind everyone. If all of us tried to defeat a snake, we wouldn't succeed. That's all I want to say.
If it's because of their resistance to venom.
Urutu Dorado lazily objected from the back of the cavern.
I believe I alone could disillusion them.
It's not about venom. I could handle it myself.
Cruzada added, casting a sideways glance at the Yararakusu.
It's about their strength, their skill, their nervous energy, call it what you will. These are fighting qualities that no one would deny our cousins. I insist that, in a campaign like the one we want to undertake, the snakes will be of great use to us. Indeed, they are absolutely essential.
But the suggestion was still unwelcome.
Why the snakes?
Exclaimed Atros.
They are despicable.
They have fish eyes.
Added the haughty Quatiarita.
They disgust me.
Lanceolada said disdainfully.
Maybe they make you feel something else.
Murmured Cruzada, glancing at her sideways.
Me? I warn you, you're making a poor impression here, defending those crawling worms. Shh!
Hissed Lanceolada, rising up.
If the cazadoras hear you,
Cruzada murmured ironically. But when the name Cazadoras, the snakes known for their spying skills, was mentioned, the entire assembly stirred.
There is no need to say that.
They're just snakes, nothing more.
They shouted.
they call themselves the cazadoras.
Cruzada replied curtly.
And we are in Congress.
Since time immemorial, it has been known among the vipers that there is a particular rivalry between the two Yararas. Lanceolada, native to the far north, and Cruzada, whose habitat extends further south. A matter of vanity over beauty, according to the snakes.
Oh, come on! Come on!
Tarifica intervened.
Let Cruzada explain why she wants the help of the snakes, considering they don't represent death like we do.
For this,
Cruzada replied, now calm.
it is essential to know what the man is doing in the house, and for that, someone needs to go there, to the house itself. This task isn't easy, because while our species may represent death, man's banner is death too, only much swifter than ours. The snakes are far more agile than we are. Any one of us could go and see, but would we return? No one is better suited for this than the Anaconda. Such explorations are part of their daily habits, and she could, by climbing onto the roof, see, hear, and return to inform us before daybreak.
The proposal was so reasonable that this time the entire assembly agreed, though with some lingering reluctance.
Who will go find her?
Someone asked. Cruzada uncoiled her tail from a branch and slipped out.
I'll go. I'll be right back.
That's right.
Lanceolada called out from behind.
You, her protector, will find her quickly.
Cruzada had just enough time to turn her head toward her and stick out her tongue, a challenge for the future. Cruzada found the Anaconda as she was climbing a tree.
Hey, Anaconda!
Cruzada called out with a soft hiss. Anaconda heard her name, but wisely refrained from responding until called again.
Anaconda!
Who's calling me?
The snake replied.
It's me, Cruzada.
Ah, my dear cousin. What do you want, beloved cousin?
This is no time for jokes, Anaconda. Do you know what's happening at the house?
Yes, that the man has arrived. What else?
And do you know we're in Congress?
Oh, no, that I didn't know.
Replied Anaconda, sliding headfirst down the tree, as confidently as if she were moving on flat ground.
Something serious must be happening for that. What's going on?
For the moment, nothing. But we've gathered in Congress precisely to prevent something from happening to us. In short, it's known that several men are in the house, and that they intend to stay permanently. It's death for us.
I thought you all were dead itself. You never tire of saying it.
The snake murmured ironically.
Let's drop that. We need your help, Anaconda.
For what? I have nothing to do with this.
Who knows? Unfortunately for you, you resemble us venomous ones quite a bit. By defending our interests, you are also defending your own.
I understand.
Replied Anaconda after a moment, during which she weighed the sum of unfavorable contingencies for her due to that resemblance.
Well, can we count on you?
What do I have to do?
Very little. Go to the house immediately and position yourself in a way that you can see and hear what's going on.
That's not much indeed.
replied Nyakanina nonchalantly, rubbing her head against the tree trunk.
But the thing is, up there, I've got a guaranteed dinner. A wild turkey that's decided to nest there since the day before yesterday.
She added.
Maybe you'll find something to eat over there.
Cruzada consoled her softly. Her cousin glanced at her sideways.
All right, let's get going.
The Yarara continued.
Let's stop by the Congress first.
Oh no,
Protested Nyakanina.
not that. I'm doing you all a favor, and that's enough. I'll go to the Congress when I return, if I return, but to see Terrifica's rough hide, Lancelada's stag eyes, and Coralina's stupid face before time, no way.
Coralina isn't there.
Doesn't matter, the rest is enough for me.
All right.
Replied Cruzada, not wanting to push the issue.
But if you don't slow down a bit, I won't be able to keep up with you.
Indeed, even at full speed, the Yarara couldn't keep pace with Nyakanina's almost leisurely slithering.
Stay back, you're close enough to the others.
The snake replied, and with that, she sped off at full speed, leaving her venomous cousin far behind in a second. A quarter of an hour later, the cazadora reached her destination. The entire house was awake. Streams of light poured out from the doors, which were wide open, and from a distance, Nyakanina could see 4 men sitting around a table. To reach her goal without being detected, she only needed to avoid the problematic encounter with a dog. Would there be one? Nyakanina feared so. Because of this, she moved forward with great caution, especially as she approached the veranda. Once there, she observed carefully. There was no dog in front of her, nor to the right, nor to the left. Only on the opposite veranda, which the snake could see between the legs of the men, a black dog lay sleeping on its side. The coast was clear. From her position, she could hear the men talking, but couldn't see the full scene. With a quick glance upward, she got what she wanted in a moment. She climbed a ladder, leaning against the wall under the corridor, and settled in the space between the wall and the ceiling, stretched out on a beam. But despite all her precautions while moving, an old nail fell to the ground, and one of the men looked up.
It's over.
Nyakanina thought, holding her breath. Another man also looked up.
What's up?
He asked.
Nothing.
The first one replied.
I thought I saw something black over there.
A rat.
The man was mistaken.
The snake murmured to herself.
Or maybe a Nyakanina.
The other man got it right.
She murmured again, preparing for a fight. But the men lowered their eyes again, and Nyakanina watched and listened for half an hour. The house, which had become a concern for the jungle, had been transformed into a scientific establishment of great importance. Already known for the particular abundance of vipers in that corner of the territory, the national government had decided to create a serotherapy institute there, where antivenoms would be prepared against snake venom. The abundance of snakes was crucial, as everyone knew that the main obstacle to a vast and reliable production of antivenom was the lack of enough snakes to extract the venom from. The new establishment could start operations almost immediately, as it already had 2 or 3 horses well on their way to complete immunization. They had managed to organize the laboratory and the serpentarium. The latter promised to grow impressively, despite the fact that the institute had brought along several venomous snakes, the same ones used to immunize the aforementioned animals. But considering that a horse in its final stage of immunization needs 6 grams of venom per injection, a quantity sufficient to kill 250 horses, it's understandable that a facility of this kind requires a very large number of available snakes. The early days, challenging as they were in setting up in the jungle, kept the senior staff of the institute awake until midnight, busy with laboratory plans and more.
And the horses? How are they today?
Asked one man with smoked glasses, who seemed to be the head of the institute.
They are doing poorly.
Another replied.
If we can make a good collection in the next few days,
Nyakanina, motionless on the beam, eyes and ears alert, began to relax.
It seems that my venomous cousins have gotten quite a fright. There isn't much to fear from these men,
she thought, and extending her head further, so that her nose was now past the edge of the beam, she observed more closely. But one mishap leads to another.
We've had a bad day,
Added someone.
5 test tubes broke.
Yakanina felt increasingly inclined toward compassion.
Poor people.
She murmured.
They've broken 5 tubes.
She was about to leave her hiding place to explore that innocent house when she heard,
On the other hand, the vipers are doing splendidly. It seems the country suits them.
What?
the snake jerked, quickly flicking her tongue.
What did that bald man in the white suit say?
But the man continued.
For them, yes. This place seems ideal, and we urgently need them for the horses and for ourselves.
Luckily, we're going to have a famous viper hunt in this country. No doubt, this is the land of vipers.
Yakanina murmured, coiling as tightly as possible on the beam.
Things are starting to look a bit different. I better stick around with these good people. You learn interesting things.
She heard so many interesting things that when, after half an hour, she tried to leave, the excess of knowledge she had gained caused her to make a false move, and a third of her body fell, hitting the wooden wall. Since she fell head first, she quickly righted herself, facing the table, her tongue vibrating. The Nyakanina, which can grow up to 3 meters long, is brave, certainly the bravest of our snakes. It can withstand a serious attack from a man who is immensely larger than it, and always stands its ground. As her own courage made her believe she was greatly feared, she was somewhat surprised to see that when the men realized what she was, they simply laughed calmly.
It's just a Nyakanina. Even better, it'll keep the house free of rats.
Rats!
Hissed the snake. And as she continued to provoke, one of the men finally stood up.
Useful or not, is still a nasty creature. One of these nights, I'll find it hunting mice in my bed.
And grabbing a nearby stick, he threw it at Nyakanina with full force. The stick whistled past the intruder's head and struck the wall with a terrible crash. There are different kinds of attacks. Out of the jungle and surrounded by 4 men, Nyakanina wasn't comfortable. She retreated quickly, focusing all her energy on the quality that, along with courage, forms her 2 primary attributes. Speed. Chased by the dog's barking and even tracked for some distance by it, something that shed new light on those people, the snake finally reached the cavern. She passed over Lanceolata and Atros and coiled up to rest, utterly exhausted.
Finally.
The group of waiting vipers exclaimed, surrounding the scout.
We thought you were going to stay with your human friends.
Murmured Nyakanina.
What news do you bring?
Asked Terrifica.
Should we expect an attack, or should we not worry about the men?
Perhaps it would be better to ignore them and move to the other side of the river.
Yakanina replied.
What?
How?
They all jumped in.
Are you crazy?
Listen first.
Then tell us.
And Nyakanina recounted everything she had seen and heard, the establishment of the Serotherapy Institute, its plans, its goals, and the decision of the men to hunt every viper in the region.
Hunt us?
Urutu Dorado, Cruzada, and Lanceolada jumped up, wounded in their pride.
You mean kill us?
No. Just hunt you, capture you, feed you well, and extract your venom every 20 days. Could life be any sweeter?
The assembly was stunned. Nyakanina had explained very well the purpose of this venom collection, but what she hadn't explained were the means to produce the anti-venom.
An anti-venom serum. That means a sure cures, immunization of men and animals against bites. The entire family condemned to starve in their native jungle.
Exactly.
Yakanina affirmed.
That's all it's about.
For Nyakanina, the anticipated danger was much less severe. What did it matter to her and her fellow hunters, who hunted with raw strength and muscle, if the animals were immunized or not? She only saw one dark spot: the excessive resemblance between a snake and a viper, which could lead to deadly confusion. Hence the snake's interest in eliminating the Institute.
I volunteer to start the campaign,
said Cruzada.
Do you have a plan?
Terrifica asked eagerly, always lacking in ideas.
Mum, I'll simply go tomorrow afternoon and run into someone.
Be careful.
Nyakanina said in a persuasive tone.
There are several empty cages. Oh, I forgot.
She added, turning to Cruzada.
When I left there a while ago, there's a very hairy black dog. I think it's tracking a viper. Be careful.
We'll see about that. But I request a full congress to be called for tomorrow night. If I can't attend, so be it.
But the assembly was now struck by a new surprise.
A dog tracking us? Are you sure?
Almost. Watch out for that dog because it could cause us more harm than all the men combined.
I'll take care of it,
exclaimed Terrifica, pleased to have the chance to use her venom glands, which, with the slightest nervous contraction, would drip venom through her fangs. But by then, each viper was already preparing to spread the word in her district, and Nyakanina, a great climber, was especially tasked with alerting the trees, the snake's favored kingdom. At 3 in the morning, the assembly dissolved. The vipers, returning to their normal lives, dispersed in different directions, now strangers to one another, silent and somber. While deep in the cavern, the rattlesnake remained coiled and motionless, her hard, glassy eyes fixed on a dream of 1,000 paralyzed dogs. It was 1 in the afternoon. Cruzada was crawling towards the house, hidden among the esparto grass. She had no other thought, nor did she believe she needed any other, than to kill the first man she encountered. She reached the veranda and coiled up there, waiting. Half an hour passed. The suffocating heat that had persisted for the past 3 days was beginning to weigh on the Yarara's eyes, when a faint tremor advanced from inside the house. The door was open, and right in front of the snake, just 30 centimeters from her head, appeared the dog, the black, hairy dog with its eyes half closed from sleep.
Damn beast,
Cruzada muttered to herself.
I would have preferred a man.
At that moment, the dog stopped sniffing and turned its head. Too late. It stifled a howl of surprise and desperately shook its bitten muzzle.
That one's taken care of,
Cruzada murmured, recoiling again. But just as the dog was about to pounce on the snake, it heard its master's footsteps and arched its back, barking at the Yarara. The man with the smoked glasses appeared next to Cruzada.
What's going on?
Someone asked from the other corridor.
It's an Atenatus, a good specimen,
the man replied. And before the snake could defend herself, she found herself strangled by some sort of clamp attached to the end of a stick. The Yarara crackled with pride at being caught. She thrashed her body in all directions, tried in vain to coil herself around the stick. Impossible. She lacked the tail support, the famous point of leverage without which even a powerful boa is reduced to humiliating impotence. The man carried her hanging like this, and she was thrown into the serpentarium. The serpentarium was simply an area of ground enclosed with smooth zinc sheets, equipped with a few cages and home to 30 or 40 vipers. Cruzada fell to the ground and remained coiled and agitated for a moment under the scorching sun. The setup was clearly temporary. Large, flat, tarred crates served as baths for the vipers, and several small huts and piled stones provided shelter for the inhabitants of this makeshift paradise. A moment later, the Yarara found herself surrounded and crossed over by 5 or 6 companions who came to inspect her species. Cruzada recognized them all, but not the large viper bathing in a cage covered with wire mesh. Who was it? She was completely unknown to the Yarara. Curious herself, Cruzada approached slowly. She got so close that the other snake reared up. Cruzada stifled a hiss of astonishment as she dropped into a defensive coil. The large viper had just inflated its neck, but monstrously, far more than her cousin Boipeva. It looked truly extraordinary.
Who are you?
Cruzada murmured.
Are you one of us?
Meaning, are you venomous? The other, convinced that the Yarara's approach was not an hack, flattened her 2 large ears.
Yes,
She replied.
but not from here. From Oraway, from India.
What's your name?
Hamadryas. Or King Cobra.
I'm Cruzada.
Yes, you don't need to tell me. I've seen many of your sisters already. When were you captured?
A little while ago. I couldn't kill.
It would have been better for you if they had killed you.
But I killed a dog.
What dog? The one here?
Yes.
The king cobra laughed, just as Cruzada had another shock. The hairy dog she thought she had killed was barking.
Surprised, huh?
Hamadryas added.
Many have experienced the same thing.
But I beat it on the head.
Cruzada replied, increasingly confused.
I've got no venom left.
She concluded.
It's a trait of the Yarara to empty nearly all of its venom glands in a single bite.
It doesn't matter whether you emptied them or not.
He can die?
Yes, but not because of us. He's immunized. But you don't know what that means.
I do.
Cruzada replied quickly.
Yakanina told us.
The king cobra then looked at her attentively.
You seem intelligent to me.
As much as you, at least.
Cruzada replied. The Asian's neck suddenly expanded again, and once more the Yarara dropped into a defensive posture. The two vipers stared at each other for a long time, and the cobra's hood slowly relaxed.
Intelligent and brave,
Hamadryas murmured.
I can talk to you. Do you know the name of my species?
Hamadryas, I suppose.
Or Naya bungarus. Or king cobra. Compared to the common Indian cobra, we are to them what you are to one of those little cotiaritas. And do you know what we eat?
No.
American vipers. Among other things.
She concluded, swaying her head in front of Cruzada. Cruzada quickly assessed the size of the foreign snake.
2 meters 50?
She asked.
60. 260, little Cruzada.
The other replied, having followed her gaze.
That's a good size. More or less the length of Anaconda, a cousin of mine. Do you know what she eats?
I suppose.
Yes, Asian vipers.
She replied, looking at Hamadryas in turn.
Well answered.
Hamadryas replied, swaying again. And after cooling her head in the water, she lazily added,
Did you say cousin?
Yes.
So she's non-venomous?
That's right. And that's precisely why she has a weakness for venomous foreigners.
But the Asian snake was no longer listening, lost in her thoughts.
Listen to me,
She suddenly said.
I'm fed up with men, dogs, horses, and this whole hell of stupidity and cruelty. You can understand me, but those others, I've been locked up in a cage for 1.5 years like a rat, mistreated, tortured periodically, and what's worse, despised, handled like a rag by vile men, and I, who have the courage, strength, and venom to finish them all, am condemned to give up my venom for the preparation of anti-venom serums. You can't imagine what this does to my pride. Do you understand me?
She concluded, looking into the Yarara's eyes.
Yes.
The other replied.
What should I do?
Only one thing. There's only one way we can take our revenge to the fullest. Come closer so no one hears us. You know how absolutely essential a point of support is to unleash our strength. Our salvation depends entirely on this. Only...
What?
The king cobra looked intently at Cruzada again.
Only that you might die.
Alone?
Oh no, some of the men will die too.
That's all I want. Continue.
But come closer, closer.
The dialogue continued for a while in such a low voice that Cruzada's body was shedding scales as it rubbed against the wire mesh. Suddenly, the cobra lunged and bit Cruzada 3 times. The other vipers who had been watching the incident from a distance cried out,
That's it. She killed her. She's a traitor.
Cruzada, bitten 3 times in the neck, dragged herself heavily through the grass. Soon she was motionless, and it was she whom the Institute employee found when he entered the serpentarium 3 hours later. The man saw the Yarara, and pushing her with his foot, he rolled her over like a rope and examined her white belly.
She's dead. Really dead.
The man murmured.
But from what?
And he bent down to inspect the viper. His examination didn't take long. At the neck and right at the base of the head, he noticed unmistakable marks of venomous fangs. The man muttered.
It can only be the Hamadryas. There she is, coiled up and staring at me like I'm another alternatus. I've told the director 20 times that the mesh is too large. There's the proof. Well,
he concluded, grabbing Cruzada by the tail and tossing her over the zinc barrier.
One less creature to watch over. The Hamadryas bit the Yarara we introduced a little while ago. We'll get very little venom from her.
That's a big problem.
The other replied.
But we need the venom for today. We're down to just 1 vial of serum. Did the alternatus die?
Yes, I threw her out. Should I bring the Hamadryas?
There's no other choice. But for the second extraction, in 2 or 3 hours.
She was broken, exhausted of all strength. She felt her mouth full of dirt and blood. Where was she? The dense veil over her eyes began to lift, and Cruzada managed to make out her surroundings. She saw, recognized, the zinc wall, and suddenly remembered everything. The black dog, the noose, the immense Asian serpent, and the battle plan in which she, Cruzada, had risked her life. She remembered it all now, as the paralysis caused by the venom began to leave her. With the memory came the full awareness of what she had to do. Was there still time? She tried to move, but in vain. Her body undulated, but stayed in the same spot without advancing. More time passed, and her anxiety grew.
And I'm only 30 meters away,
she murmured.
2 minutes. Just 1 minute of life, and I'll make it in time.
With renewed effort, she managed to slide, desperately dragging herself toward the laboratory. She crossed the yard, reaching the door just as the worker, with both hands, held Hamadryas suspended in the air, while the man with the smoked glasses inserted the watch glass into her mouth. His hand was about to squeeze the glands, and Cruzada was still in the doorway.
I won't have time,
she thought desperately, and dragging herself in a final effort, she thrust her gleaming fangs forward. The worker, feeling his bare foot burn from the Yarara's bite, let out a cry and flinched. Not much, but enough for the hanging body of the king cobra to swing and reach the leg of the table where she quickly coiled. With that point of support, she tore her head from the worker's hands and sank her fangs deep into the left wrist of the man with the smoked glasses, right into a vein. It was done. Amid the first screams, both the Asian cobra and the Yarara fled without being chased.
A point of support.
The cobra murmured as she sped away across the field.
That's all I was missing. And I finally got it.
Yes,
the Yarara replied, running beside her, still in great pain.
But I wouldn't play that game again.
Back there, 2 black threads of sticky blood hung from the man's wrist. An injection of Hamadryas venom into a vein is far too serious for any mortal to endure for long with eyes open. And the wounded man's eyes closed forever within 4 minutes. The Congress was in full session, Besides Tarifica and Ñacanina, and the Yararas Urutu Dorado, Cuacharita, Nuvid, Atros, and Lanceolada, Coralina had also attended, she of the stupid head, according to Ñacanina, though that didn't make her bite any less painful. Moreover, she was undeniably beautiful, with her red and black rings. As is well known, vanity about beauty runs strong among vipers, and Coralina was quite pleased with the absence of her sister Frontal, whose triple rings of black and white on a purple background placed this coral snake at the highest rank of Ophidian beauty. The Cazadoras were represented that night by Drymobia primarily, who was often called the Yararakusu of the forest, though her appearance was quite different. Also present was Sipo, a beautiful green snake and an excellent bird hunter, Radinia, small and dark, who never left the pools of water, Boipeva, known for flattening herself completely against the ground at the slightest threat, Trigemina, and Esculapia, along with their other tree-dwelling companions. Several species of both venomous and non-venomous snakes were also absent, an absence that warrants some explanation. By full congress, we refer to the vast majority of species, particularly those that could be considered royal due to their importance. Since the first Congress of Vipers, it had been agreed that the more numerous species, holding the majority, could enforce their decisions absolutely. Hence the completeness of this current Congress, though the absence of the Yarara Surukuku was lamentable, as she could not be found anywhere. This was especially regrettable, as this viper, which can reach 3 meters in length, is not only the Queen of the Americas, but also the Vice Empress of the World Empire of Vipers, second only in size and venom potency to the Asian Hamadryas. Some were absent, including Crusada, but the vipers all pretended not to notice her absence. Despite everything, they were forced to turn their heads when a face with large, lively eyes appeared among the ferns.
May I come in?
The visitor said cheerfully. As if an electric spark had run through all their bodies, the vipers raised their heads upon hearing that voice.
What do you want here?
Lanceolada shouted, deeply irritated.
This is not your place,
cried Urutu Dorado, showing signs of liveliness for the first time.
Out! Out!
Several others cried, filled with intense unease. But Terrifica, with a clear yet trembling hiss, managed to make herself heard.
Comrades, let's not forget that we're in Congress and we all know its laws. No one can commit an act of violence while it's in session. Come in, Anaconda.
Well said!
Exclaimed Ñacanina with quiet irony.
Noble words of our queen assure us. Come in, Anaconda.
And the lively, amiable head of Anaconda advanced, dragging behind it 2.5 meters of dark, elastic body. She passed by them all, exchanging an intelligent glance with Ñacanina, and went to coil up with soft hisses of satisfaction next to Terrifica, who couldn't help but shudder.
Do I bother you?
No, not at all.
Terrifica replied.
It's my venom glands that bother me. They're swollen.
Anaconda and Ñacanina exchanged another ironic look and paid attention. The assembly's evident hostility toward the newcomer had some foundation, which is not difficult to appreciate. The anaconda is the queen of all snakes, surpassing even the Malayan python. Her strength is extraordinary, and no creature of flesh and bone can withstand her embrace. When she begins to let her 10 meters of greenish body with large black velvet spots fall from the foliage, the entire jungle shudders and recoils. But the anaconda is too strong to hate anyone, except for one being, and this awareness of her power makes her always maintain a good relationship with humans. If she detests anyone, it is, naturally, venomous snakes, hence the viper's unease around the courteous anaconda. However, Anaconda is not a native of the region. Wandering in the foamy waters of the Paraná River, she had arrived there with a great flood and remained content in the area, in good relations with everyone, particularly with Nyakanina, with whom she had formed a lively friendship. Besides, this was a young Anaconda, far from reaching the 10 meters of her fortunate ancestors, but the 2.5 meters she already measured were worth double, considering the strength of this magnificent boa, who, for fun at twilight, crosses the entire Amazon with half her body raised out of the water. But Atroz had just taken the floor before the already distracted assembly.
I think we could begin now,
She said.
First of all, we need to know something about Cruzada. She promised to be here soon.
What she promised is to be here when she could.
Nyakanina interjected.
We should wait for her.
For what?
Lanceolada replied, not bothering to turn her head toward the snake.
What do you mean for what?
Nyakanina exclaimed, raising herself up.
It takes all the stupidity of a Lanceolada to say that. I'm tired of hearing nothing but nonsense in this Congress. It seems as if the venomous ones think they represent the entire family. No one, least of all her,
She pointed her tail at Lanceolada.
is unaware that our plan depends precisely on the news Cruzada brings. What do you mean? For what? We're in trouble if the intelligence of those who ask such questions dominates this Congress.
Don't insult.
Cuatiarita reproached her gravely. Nyakanina turned to her.
And you? Who asked you to butt in?
Don't insult.
The little one repeated with dignity. Nyakanina considered the honorable youngster and changed her tone.
The tiny cousin is right.
She concluded calmly.
Lanceolada, I apologize.
I don't know anything.
The Yarara replied angrily.
It doesn't matter, but I still apologize.
Fortunately, Coralina, who had been watching at the entrance of the cavern, entered hissing.
Cruzada is coming. Finally.
The Congress members exclaimed joyfully. But their joy turned to astonishment when, behind the Yarara, they saw an immense viper, completely unknown to them, enter. While Cruzada went to lie down beside Atros, the intruder slowly and gradually coiled herself in the center of the cavern and remained motionless.
Terrifica.
Cruzada said.
Welcome her. She's one of us.
We are sisters.
The rattlesnake hurried to say, observing her uneasily. All the vipers, dying of curiosity, slithered toward the newcomer.
She seems like a non-venomous cousin.
One said with a hint of disdain.
Yes,
Added another.
she has round eyes.
And a long tail.
And also...
But suddenly they fell silent because the stranger had just monstrously inflated her neck. It lasted only a second. The hood retracted as the newcomer turned to her friend, her voice trembling.
Cruzada, tell them not to come so close. I can't control myself.
Yes, leave her alone.
Cruzada exclaimed.
Especially
She added.
since she just saved my life, and perhaps all of ours.
That was enough. The Congress hung on Cruzada's words as she narrated everything. The encounter with the dog, the noose of the man with the smoked glasses, Hamadryas' magnificent plan, the final catastrophe, and the deep sleep that overcame the Yarara until an hour before her arrival.
The result
She concluded.
is 2 men down, and they were the most dangerous. Now we just have to eliminate the others.
Or the horses.
Hamadryas said.
Or the dog.
Nyakanina added.
I think the horses.
Insisted the king cobra.
And here's why. As long as the horses are alive, a single man can prepare thousands of vials of serum with which they will be immunized against us. Rarely, you know this well, do we get the chance to bite into a vein like yesterday. I insist that we should direct all our attacks against the horses. We'll deal with the rest later. As for the dog,
She concluded, glancing sideways at Nyakanina.
I find him negligible.
It was evident from the start that the Asian snake and the native Nyakanina had taken an immediate dislike to each other. If one, as a venomous animal, represented an inferior type to the cazadora, the latter's strength and agility provoked the hatred and jealousy of Hamadryas. Thus, the old and tenacious rivalry between venomous and non-venomous snakes was likely to intensify even further at this final Congress.
For my part,
Nyakanina exclaimed.
I believe that horses and men are secondary in this fight. No matter how easy it may be for us to eliminate them, that easy is nothing compared to what the dog can do the first day they decide to give him a proper hand. And they will, rest assured, within 24 hours. An immunized dog against any bite, even that of this lady with the hat on her neck,
She added, gesturing toward the king cobra,
is the most formidable enemy we can face, especially since that enemy has been trained to track our scent. What do you think, Cruzada?
It was well known in the Congress, the unusual friendship that united the viper and the snake. Possibly more than friendship. It was a mutual respect for each other's intelligence.
I agree with Nyakanina.
Cruzada replied.
If the dog starts working, we're doomed.
Then we should strike first.
Hamadryas countered.
We can't strike fast enough. I'm decidedly siding with my cousin.
Cruzada insisted.
I was sure you would.
Nyakanina said calmly. This was more than the king cobra could bear, without her anger rising, filling her fangs with venom.
I don't know how much value this talkative young lady's opinion holds,
She said, returning Nyakanina's sideways glance.
The real danger in this situation is for us, the venomous ones, who carry death as our black banner. The non-venomous snakes know well that humans don't fear them because they are completely incapable of instilling fear.
Well said.
Came a voice that had not yet spoken. Hamadryas quickly turned around, as she thought she detected a faint irony in the calm tone, and saw two large, bright eyes looking at her peacefully.
Are you talking to me?
She asked disdainfully.
Yes to you.
The newcomer replied gently.
What you've said is deeply true.
The king cobra felt the same earlier hint of irony, and, as if by premonition, she lightly measured the body of her interlocutor, coiled in the shadow.
You are Anaconda.
You've said it.
The other replied, bowing slightly. But Nyakanina wanted to clear things up once and for all.
One moment.
She exclaimed.
No.
Anaconda interrupted.
Allow me, Nyakanina. When a being is well-formed, agile, strong, and fast, they seize their enemy with the energy of nerves and muscles, which is the honor of all creatures in creation. That's how the hawk hunts, the jaguar, the tiger, and us, all beings of noble structure. But when one is clumsy, heavy, unintelligent, and incapable of fighting openly for survival, then they have a pair of fangs to assassinate in treachery, like that imported lady who wants to dazzle us with her big hat.
Indeed, the king cobra, beside herself with rage, had inflated her monstrous neck to lunge at the insolent one. But the entire Congress also rose threateningly at the sight of this.
Careful!
Careful!
Several shouted at once.
The Congress is inviolable!
Down with the hood!
Atros cried out, her eyes blazing. Hamadryas turned toward her with a hiss of fury.
Down with the hood!
Urutu Dorado and Lanceolata stepped forward. Hamadryas had a moment of wild rebellion, thinking of how easily she could have destroyed one after the other of her opponents. But faced with the entire Congress's combative stance, she slowly lowered her hood.
Fine.
She hissed.
I respect the Congress. But I demand that when this is over, no one provokes me.
No one will provoke you,
Anaconda said. The cobra turned toward her with concentrated hatred.
And you, least of all, because you fear me.
Fear? Good heavens, me? Fear you? Are you serious?
Anaconda replied, advancing.
Peace! Peace!
Peace!
All the others cried out again.
We're setting a terrible example. Let's decide once and for all what we should do.
Yes, it's time for that.
Terrifica said.
We have two plans to follow, the one proposed by Nyakanina and the one by our ally. Do we start the attack on the dog, or do we throw all our forces against the horses?
Now, although the majority might lean toward the snake's plan, the size, intelligence, and demonstrated strategy of the Asian snake had impressed the Congress favorably. Her brilliant strategy against the Institute's personnel was still fresh in their minds, and whatever her new plan might be, it was clear that they already owed her the elimination of 2 men. Moreover, aside from Nyakanina and Cruzada, who had already engaged in the campaign, none of the others fully grasped the terrible threat posed by an immunized dog trained to track vipers. Thus, it's understandable that the King Cobra's plan ultimately prevailed. Although it was already very late, it was also a matter of life and death to launch the attack immediately, and it was decided to proceed at once.
Forward, then,
concluded the rattlesnake.
Does anyone have anything else to say?
Nothing,
Shouted Nyakanina.
except that we'll regret this.
And the vipers and snakes, greatly augmented by the members of the species whose representatives were leaving the cavern, launched themselves toward the Institute.
One word.
Terrifica still cautioned.
As long as the campaign lasts, we are in Congress, and we are inviolable to each other. Understood?
Yes, enough talk.
They all hissed. The King Cobra, as Anaconda passed by her side, said to her darkly,
Afterward.
You can count on it.
Anaconda cheerfully cut her off, darting like an arrow to the vanguard. The Institute staff kept vigil by the bedside of the worker who had been bitten by the Yarara. Dawn was approaching. An employee looked out the window, through which the hot night air was entering, and thought he heard a noise coming from one of the sheds. He listened for a moment and said,
It seems to be coming from the stable. Go check it out, Fragoso.
Less than half a minute later, they heard hurried footsteps in the yard, and Fragoso appeared, pale with surprise.
The stable is full of vipers,
he said.
Full?
Asked the new chief.
What do you mean? What's going on?
I don't know.
Let's go.
And they rushed outside.
The boy! The boy!
The chief called to the dog, who was whimpering in his sleep under the sick man's bed. Running, they all entered the stable. There, by the light of the wind lantern, they could see the horses thrashing about, kicking against 60 or 80 vipers that were swarming the stable. The animals neighed and kicked the troughs into the air, but the vipers, as if guided by a higher intelligence, dodged the blows and bit furiously. The men, driven by their sudden arrival, had fallen among them. At the abrupt burst of light, the invaders paused for a moment, then immediately launched another attack, and with the confusion of horses and men, it was impossible to tell who they were targeting. The Institute staff found themselves surrounded on all sides by vipers. Fragoso felt fangs strike the edge of his boots, just half a centimeter from his knee, and he brought down his stick, a hard, flexible stick that is never absent in a forest house, on the attacker. The new director split another in two, and another employee had time to crush the head of a large viper, just as it was coiling with alarming speed around the dog's neck. This all happened in less than 10 seconds. The sticks fell with furious force on the vipers, who kept advancing, biting at the boots, trying to climb up the men's legs. Amid the horses' neighing, the men's shouts, the dogs barking, and the vipers hissing, the assault grew increasingly intense on the defenders when Fragoso, as he lunged at an immense viper he thought he recognized, stepped on something at full speed and fell, while the lantern shattered into 1,000 pieces and went out.
Fall back!
The new director shouted.
The boy! Here!
They retreated to the yard, followed by the dog, who had fortunately managed to free himself from the mass of vipers. Pale and gasping, they looked at each other.
It seems like the devil's work. I've never seen anything like it. What's with the vipers in this country? Yesterday, that double bite, as if mathematically planned. Today, fortunately, they don't realize that they've saved the horses with their bites. Oh well, dawn is approaching, and then things will be different.
I thought I saw the king cobra in there.
Fragoso said, while binding his sore wrist muscles.
Yes,
Added the other employee.
I saw her clearly. And the boy, is he okay?
No, very bitten. Fortunately, he can withstand as much as they want to give him.
The men returned to the sick room, where the patient's breathing had improved. He was now drenched in a copious sweat.
It's starting to get light.
The new director said, peering out the window.
Antonio, you can stay here. Fragoso and I will go out.
Shall we take the lassos?
Fragoso asked.
Oh no!
Replied the chief, shaking his head.
With other vipers, we would have caught them all in a second. These are too unusual. Sticks and just in case the machete.
Not unusual snakes, but vipers, who in the face of immense danger combined the collective intelligence of their species, were the enemy that had assaulted the Serotherapy Institute. The sudden darkness that followed the breaking of the lantern alerted the combatants to the danger of greater light and stronger resistance. Moreover, they could already feel the humidity in the atmosphere, signaling the imminent arrival of daylight.
If we stay a moment longer,
Cruzada exclaimed.
They'll cut off our retreat. Fall back!
Fall back! Fall back!
They all shouted. In a mad rush, trampling over each other, they fled into the open field. They marched in a terrified, defeated horde, watching with dismay as the day began to break in the distance. They had been fleeing for 20 minutes when a clear, sharp bark, though still distant, stopped the panting column.
Wait!
Urutu Dorado shouted.
Let's see how many of us are left and what we can do.
In the still uncertain light of dawn, they took stock of their forces. 18 snakes had been left dead under the horses' hooves, including the 2 coral snakes. Atros had been cut in 2 by Fragoso, and Rimobia lay over there with her skull crushed while strangling the dog. Quatiarita, Radinea, and Boipeva were also missing. In total, 23 combatants had been annihilated. The remaining ones, without exception, were all bruised, trampled, kicked, covered in dust and blood among their broken scales.
So much for the success of our campaign.
Ñacarina said bitterly, pausing to rub her head against a stone.
Congratulations, Amadrias.
But she kept to herself what she had overheard behind the closed door of the stable, since she had been the last to leave. Instead of killing the horses, they had saved their lives, as they were on the verge of death due to a lack of venom. It is known that for a horse undergoing immunization, venom is as essential to its daily life as water itself, and they die if it becomes scarce. A second bark, following their trail, sounded behind them.
We are in imminent danger.
Derifica shouted.
What do we do?
To the cave! To the cave!
They all cried, slithering at full speed.
But you're all crazy!
Ñacanina shouted as she ran.
They'll crush you all! You're going to your death! Listen to me, let's scatter!
The fugitives stopped, undecided. Despite their panic, something told them that scattering was the only way to survive, and they frantically looked around. A single supportive voice. Just one, and they would have done it. But the king cobra, humiliated and defeated in her second attempt at domination, filled with hatred for a country that was bound to be hostile to her from now on, preferred to drag the other species down with her.
Yakanina is crazy,
She exclaimed.
If we separate, they'll kill us one by one, without us being able to defend ourselves. It's different in the cave. To the cavern!
Yes, to the cavern!
The terrified column echoed, fleeing.
to the cavern.
Nyakanina saw this and understood they were headed to their death. But vile, defeated, and mad with panic, the vipers were going to sacrifice themselves despite everything. And with a proud flick of her tongue, she, who could have easily saved herself with her speed, headed with the others straight to death. She felt a body beside her and was glad to recognize Anaconda.
See what the Asian has brought us to,
she said with a smile.
Yes, she's a bad one.
Anaconda murmured as they ran side by side.
and now she's leading them all to be massacred together.
She at least won't get to enjoy that,
Anaconda noted grimly. With a burst of speed, they caught up with the column. They had already arrived.
One moment.
Anaconda, whose eyes were shining, stepped forward.
You may not know, but I'm certain that in 10 minutes not one of us will be alive. The Congress and its laws are over. Aren't they terrifica?
A long silence followed.
Yes.
murmured Terrifica, overwhelmed.
It's over.
Then,
Anaconda continued, looking around.
Before I die, I like to... better this way.
She concluded, satisfied, seeing the king cobra slowly advancing toward her. This was probably not the ideal time for a fight. But ever since the world began, nothing, not even the presence of man above them, can stop a venomous and a Cazadora snake from settling their personal disputes. The first strike favored the king cobra. Her fangs sank deep into Anaconda's neck. But Anaconda, with the marvelous maneuver of the boas to counter a near-fatal blow, lashed her body forward like a whip and wrapped herself around Hamadryas, who instantly felt herself being suffocated. The boa, concentrating all her life into that embrace, tightened her steel coils progressively. But the king cobra didn't release her grip. There was a moment when Anaconda felt her head crack between Hamadryas' teeth, but she managed to make a supreme effort, and this final burst of will tipped the balance in her favor. The half-asphyxiated cobra's mouth finally released, drooling, while Anaconda's free head bit into Hamadryas' body. Gradually, assured of her rival's immobilization in her deadly grip, Anaconda's mouth crept up the cobra's neck with short, sharp bites, while the king cobra desperately shook her head. Anaconda's 96 sharp teeth kept climbing, reached the hood, scaled it, reached the throat, and continued until they finally sank into the cobra's head with a long, deep crunch of bones. It was over. The boa loosened her coils, and the massive body of the king cobra slid heavily to the ground, dead.
At least I'm content.
Anaconda murmured, collapsing onto the body of the Asian. It was at that moment that the vipers heard the sharp bark of the dog less than 100 meters away. And they, who had been frantically rushing into the cavern 10 minutes earlier, now felt the savage flare of the fight to the death ignite in their eyes for the entire jungle.
Let's go inside!
Some still shouted.
No, here!
Let's die here.
They all hissed. And against the stone wall that blocked their retreat, with their necks and heads raised over their coiled bodies, eyes ablaze, they waited. Their wait was not long. In the still, pale light, against the dark backdrop of the forest, they saw the tall silhouettes of the new director and Fragoso, holding the dog, who, mad with rage, lunged forward. Neuvid took advantage of the moment to sink her fangs into the dog's belly, but just then the men reached them. In a second, Terrifica and Neuvid were dead, with their spines crushed. Urutu Dorado was cutting too, as was Sipo. Lanzo Alata managed to bite the dog's tongue, but 2 seconds later she was split into 3 pieces by a double blow of a stick next to Esculapia. The battle, or rather the massacre, continued furiously amid hisses and Daboy's hoarse barks as he was everywhere at once. One by one they fell without mercy, and they didn't ask for any, crushed by the dog's jaws or the men's blows. They were left massacred in front of the cavern, where they had held their last congress, and among the last to fall were Cruzada and Yacanina. Not one was left. The men sat down, gazing at the total massacre of the species, triumphant one day. Daboy, panting at their feet, showed some signs of poisoning despite being powerfully immunized. He had been bitten 64 times. As the men were getting up to leave, they noticed Anaconda, who was beginning to revive.
What's this boa doing here?
The new director said.
This isn't her country. It seems she got involved with the king cobra and avenged us in her own way. If we can save her, it will be a great thing, as she seems terribly poisoned. Come on, let's take her. Maybe one day she'll save us from all this venomous scum.
And they left, carrying Anaconda on a pole slung over their shoulders. Wounded and exhausted, she was thinking of Yacanina, whose fate, with a little less pride, could have been similar to hers. Anaconda did not die. She lived with the men for a year, observing everything with curiosity until one night she left. But the story of this journey, which took her up the Paraná River for many months, beyond Guaira, and further still to the deadly gulf with a Paranais called the Dead River, the strange life Anaconda led, and the second journey she finally undertook with her brothers on the flooded waters. This entire story of rebellion and the assault on floating islands belongs to another tale.